Yeah, but that should be an interesting show. We're still potentially talking about still all Sabin, isn't it? Sabin related again tonight, and then
You know what? I
potentially.
found another form of hunting that we didn't talk about because
Oh yeah,
I went to the font of knowledge, Wikipedia,
Wikipedia. Yeah.
and I was looking at HSA, and then it said "see opposition to hunting." So I clicked on that. The first thing you see is the seal hunt, which we did. Well, we're going to talk about maybe the Orkneys, but when you say seal hunt, most people think about Canada. You know, and I don't even know if that still goes on or not.
Hello.
Ronnie.
Hello, I think that's solved it.
Yeah, he fixed it.
Whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, we had you on a treble loop.
I know it was. Could have put some music to that, and it would have been a good number, wouldn't it?
Well, that's still a possibility. All this is recorded, don't forget.
Yeah.
But no, that's
So you were asking with the
interesting about this seal hunting, because I mean, obviously, as you say, when you talk about that, quite often people just assume you're talking about potential places like Alaska and things like that. They don't think that you're talking about like Scotland or Ireland or any of these places. They kind of imagine it somewhere a long, long way away and out of view, out of sight. Because I mean, even that Eva Bat second-hand coat, that's all about seal hunting. Hey Roscoe, you're right. Hey, welcome everyone.
Yeah, Ronnie, do you remember the Canadian seal hunt, which was led by IFAW? Remember that International Fund for Animal Welfare?
Oh yes, there were a lot of big protests in London, weren't there, outside the Canadian embassy regarding the seal hunting?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first financial scandals that I knew about because was it Davis, the guy who ran it? What's his first name? He went running off.
Was it Brian Davis?
Brian Davis, yeah, he went running off with a few million quid.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that they used the oil from seal as well? It's not just obviously like the pelts, but also like obviously I know they eat the flesh, but I'm sure there's something to do with an oil, or is that a whale?
Well, no, because the point is the thing about the Canadian thing was that they would skin them on the ice and then just leave them. They would just leave the skinned body on the ice, so they wouldn't be using them for anything else apart from fur. And also there was a kind of like small window opportunities because the pelt of choice was called the white coats. And so within a few weeks, the white coats started to get spotty and their pelts were then unsaleable. So if you're looking for the very plush white, they were only in that state, the seal pups,
right,
for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because I've been looking on the internet about the Orkneys.
You haven't, you devil, Ronnie, you devil.
I have been, and it seems that seals are in decline in the Orkneys, and I can't find anything about them being hunted there anymore. So perhaps that's stopped.
Is that climate related?
Well, there's this article. I mean, this article is 3 years old that I found, but it says that there's been a decrease of 85% since the mid-1990s in some areas.
Yeah, it's funny because I covered that in one of my time tunnels, but I can't quite remember the details now. But it was something to do with salmon farming, which is big in Scotland.
Yeah,
and so I think a lot of the seals are shot by the salmon.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't be.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be classed as hunting in the,
No, it'd be classed as pest control, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But they did used to do a seal hunting in the Wash, in East Anglia. That's for people not kind of not from England. That's kind of eastern. That's kind of eastern England, isn't it?
If I remember rightly, there was only seals on something like 3 of the Orkney Islands. Anyway, I think 2 of them never had seals on.
Oh, there's loads of Orkney Islands because we had to put camps. I think we put camps on about 4 or maybe 5 islands, and they were often uninhabited. Because that's why. I only know the ones that have got names and civilization.
But what was
Actually, Gemma, who's just joined, she's got a bit of Orkney experience, in fact, and Orkney knowledge.
All right.
She might know the answer to that.
the interesting thing, though? I mean, the one in I just mentioned, the one in that took place in the Wash, was going for years until 1973 was the last year it took place.
You're going to get ahead of yourself here, Ronnie, if you're not careful.
Yeah. So if we don't want to, are we still not up to that date yet? Because I can mention it later if you want.
Well, we're going to move to the band, aren't we, after this? So
yeah, that's right. So I can talk about that then.
it was your idea, and now you're going to break your own rule.
Well, yeah, I think when it comes to the Sabin, it's not the end of the world in terms of if we stick with hunting specifically to move around a little bit in terms of dates.
Well, the Sabs did try to disrupt that killing of seals as well. They went out in inflatables and tried to stop that as well. The one on the Wash.
Yeah, well, it was the Sabs that joined with Sea Shepherd, but also the real interesting story about that is that initially the Sabs joined with Greenpeace International. Now, Greenpeace International is the big conservation group, not the anarchist.
So when just quickly, when did Sea Shepherd found?
Oh, now there's a good question. Maybe
They were a breakaway from Greenpeace. Weren't they?
could have been about 1976, 77.
Okay.
I should know that actually. Yeah, because Paul Watson, who was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace International, got thrown out of Greenpeace International.
Yeah.
Because he physically disarmed a seal killer, and threw the hapik, that horrible kind of weapon they used. He threw it down a blowhole. I used to do this. I used to do a Sea Shepherd slideshow back in Liverpool years and years ago. It must have been about 1980 now, 81 maybe.
Old-fashioned slides, you mean?
Yeah, there were the ones that you had to be careful that you got them in right.
Yeah. My dad used to get his out most Christmases. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a carousel and all that, or even when I first started, I think it was just two that you swap from side to side. And if you didn't put them in upside down, then the image was upside down.
Yeah, or the wrong way round, or I know.
Yeah, you could do it the wrong way round as well. Yeah, everything could go wrong.
I remember them. Yeah, many a memory.
It was 1977.
Oh, okay.
It was
founded. 76, 77. That's what I said. Yeah, and so
yeah.
that was one of their first things. They went to in fact, one of the first things that Sea Shepherd did was oppose game hunting in Africa, I believe, because Watson formed this thing called Earth Defenders or something like that.
It was Earth Force Society.
Yeah, this is all in my vegan time tunnel, folks. If you want to into that.
Yeah, I was going to say you've got a time tunnel all about Paul Watson, haven't you?
Well, I got two. I got one about the Orkneys and one about the beginning of Sea Shepherd, because a lot of people don't know the story about the beginning of Sea Shepherd because some of it was actually hidden by Sea Shepherd themselves. For example, Ronnie, you'll remember Dave McCall, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, Dave was almost like totally invisibilized by Sea Shepherd, and I don't know why, but he was, and so there's not many histories of Sea Shepherd that even mention him.
No, I've searched for him on the internet and with no success really to do with that. But it's interesting because Paul Watson now, well, it was in late 2022. Has now been removed from the board of directors of Sea Shepherd.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So it happened again to him.
Yeah.
The second thing he formed, he got chucked out of.
Yeah, and that's due to the organisation shifting away from his policy of independent direct action to one of collaboration with governments.
Yeah, great.
Doesn't surprise you, does it?
They've gone from directly saving lives to basically saying, well, as long as you do it in a nice way.
Well, you see,
the moderation of the movement, yes, again.
Although the thing is, I would argue that the fundamental way to prevent, the slaughter of whales is actually vegan education, is to educate people in those countries that were involved in the killing of whales to become vegan, because that's the only way you're actually going to change the policies of those governments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many boats these days that Sea Shepherd have got access to, but potentially putting a glass bottom in one of them and taking people out on like sightseeing tours whilst educating them is a much more effective method than doing deals with the government. Like, actually letting people see these animals without hunting them whilst educating them is a far more effective tool where you can conquer both things at the same time. Because some of these people have got a love for going out on a boat, right? So that might want to be still challenged in some way. You can do both of those things.
Also, you see, those governments are going to take more notice of their own populations than on
Of course, yeah.
people from other countries, because they're not elected, say, the government in, I'm not sure which countries are still doing the whaling. I think it's Japan. It was Japan, wasn't it? And Norway.
Norway was, yeah.
Norway still are, I think.
Well, Japan did this kind of little trick, calling it scientific whaling, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, the governments in those countries aren't going to take that much notice of people from other countries, because people in their own countries that actually elect them. Yeah. They're going to take much more notice of their own population. So it's really important, to change the mindset of the population.
Well, to be honest, Ronnie, the last British election didn't seem to suggest that any political party took much notice of anybody.
Well, what they'll take note, because it still wasn't really tackled at a fundamental enough level, you see. If you've got, I mean, fundamentally,
but it is a key point, Ronnie. And yes. I mean, to just extend on it even further, it's not just the fact that the current government are likely to listen to these people. If you educate the people within that nation or within that culture, then they're obviously going to educate their children, and you set this sort of standard going forward.
Yeah,
if they just listen to Sea Shepherd whilst this particular government are in place, well, not only could the government change, but Sea Shepherd could just relocate and all of that's forgotten. Whereas, if you educate the nation, the information stays within the nation.
You have to change. You have to change the culture, and that also then changes politics, because you get.
Yeah, I think that the animal movement needs to do a bit of critical thinking about politics. First of all, politicians are followers. They follow the vote, as you're saying, Ronnie. They also follow the money. Yeah. I mean, Israel runs a lot of the politics of loads and loads of different countries. We know that. So this is the issue. People tend to think of politicians as leaders. They're not, they're followers. And so this is why you've got to get the population to pressure the politics, and then the politics will change. You can't just ask them politely.
I think the problem is that you have politicians that have certain ideologies, and those ideologies will make them extremely resistant to pressure, and that's the problem.
You mean their bank balances? You mean, Ronnie?
Well, and that all may be part of it, but you see, like public opinion doesn't necessarily result in a change in the law. I mean, one example of that is to do with hunting. I mean, for decades and decades and decades, there were a large majority of the population here in the UK opposed to fox hunting, and there's even more, larger number opposed to hare coursing, for instance. We're talking about in the 70%, 80% people. Now, that didn't result, for decades and decades, that didn't result in any change in the law. That didn't result in hunting being banned. And when it was so-called banned in the early 2000s, the legislation was really weak and has allowed the hunts to continue, you see, and then it was also not enforced. So public opinion of itself isn't enough to have a change in the law. You've got to have politicians who themselves want that change, you see. That's the thing. And so that's why I think if we educate more people to become vegan, we'll inevitably get more vegan politicians. We'll have more vegans to elect them, and so you'll have people entering politics who believe in animal liberation and fervently want to take measures, to free other animals from oppression. And that's the only way that I think we're going to do it.
The population change as well in terms of what they want. I mean, a lot of the population that were anti-fox hunting. Okay, the legislation that was brought in, it's not good enough for us and for those that genuinely care. But for the average public, they think fox hunting's banned. They do.
Oh yes, they will.
So it's got to come. The people that are potentially saying this isn't enough, we need a stronger legislation or whatever, they've got to be vegan as well. So yeah, I agree. It's vegan education
it's the only
forward.
way. And I think the problem, the problem with our movement is we don't deal with things, or people in the movement in general, I suppose, don't deal with things at a fundamental level. They don't seek to solve like the fundamental problem of why other animals are oppressed and exploited.
It's because it's long term, Ronnie. And
I mean that goes back to literally what we were just talking about in regards to fox hunting. The vast majority of people who oppose fox hunting don't think about oppression; they think it's cruel.
Yes,
because the justification for it, which is why they're not looking at this currently and saying, "Well, hang on." This whole like trail hunting, this is just like a bluff. This is just a disguise. They're not thinking about those things because, as far as they're concerned, the cruelty has been removed. It's not on their screens. It's not in front of them. They don't get talked about. It's done. It's only us that are pushing for more changes. It's only us that are trying to do something about it. The non-vegans, for the most part, unless they specifically care about this issue, don't care.
So it's getting on for 20. Oh, it's gone 20 past. Ronnie, can you give us your first arsehole story?
Oh right, yes, I've got two stories.
Yeah, but can you split them up?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a graphic
story.
A bit of a graphic image, I know, but try and split your arseholes a bit.
One is slightly funnier than the other, and the funnier one is in terms of time sequence comes second. So the slightly less funny one, although it still is amusing, involves otter hunting. What happened when I became involved in the Hunt Saboteurs in shortly after I became vegan, which was in 1972, and it was in the it was in the spring of 1972. So I just kind of caught the end of the fox hunting season, and I went out, sabbing 2 or 3 fox hunts, and then it was summer, and then that's the time for. It was the time for otter hunting. It's now mink hunting after the otters became a protected species. But at the time, back in the early 70s, otters weren't protected, and so they went out on the rivers and hunted otters. And there was one particular otter hunting pack that we used to sab, which was called the Eastern Counties, which operated, a Norfolk, Suffolk type area. And the master of the Eastern Counties hunt was a guy called Stafford Babbage, whom we called Stuff Cabbage. See, this guy. And I remember he had a big beard. They wore blue. You often associate hunting with red coats, people wearing red, but the otter hunts didn't necessarily wear red. So some of them wore blue, some of them wore green as their colours. And this guy was leading. We were waiting to follow them, and this guy was, sort of leading the hunt, the other hunters and the hunt followers along the riverbank. And he climbed over a barbed wire fence and ripped the arse out of his trousers. He ripped the arse completely out of his trousers, and there was a big flap hanging down. You could see thankfully he had underpants on, but you could see his arse. And I mean, we were in stitches. We were watching this. We were in stitches. And what was amusing? He just carried on as if
the claim that he didn't have any, huh?
Yeah, he carried on as if nothing had happened. This guy, and for the whole of the afternoon, he was leading the hunt with his arse sticking out of this huge rip in his hunting trousers, which we found quite funny because this guy was like a very hoity-toity type character. And
That's a great phrase, isn't it? Hoity-toity.
he was a hoity-toity character. So it was very amusing to see him walking around with his, his arse showing, or at least his underpants showing all afternoon. So that's
that was the days of everyone walking around with a phone camera.
Well, yeah, we've seen that. There's no. I mean, nowadays his arse would be all over Facebook.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would.
It'd have to be on Arsebook, surely.
Arsebook, yes.
Yeah. The problem with some of these people is, though, you can't tell which end they're talking out of. So it could be either.
Well, that's right. But you see, the thing about the otter hunting was it was kind of, there was much more likely to be violence from the hunters on otter hunting because you were kind of in close proximity to them because they were on foot. You see.
Yeah, that's true.
You were right.
And obviously, you're on a lot of riverbanks and things like that. So you've got to find space
and
it's not easy to get away from each other, was it?
No,
really?
It's not, especially if there's mud and all that kind of things as well. Yeah, I can imagine that's far more difficult.
And I think a lot of what we tried to do was just put them off by being there.
Yeah,
really, and just being amongst them, and that would stop them doing what they were.
On that note, though, just very, very quickly, that's one of the things that I've always thought that somewhere like Camp Out could do. They could find out where their most nearest hunt was on the Saturday, for example, and arrange for like 200-300 people to all rock up at once, because the hunt would just see you and go home, and that would show such a message across the country. They all communicate with one another, they all speak, right? And as you say, it would be all over Facebook and that sort of stuff. No one would really have to do anything except organise the transport.
Well, that was exactly the policy of the Northern Animal Liberation League, Andy, because they were actually against their
violence. Yeah, and they turn up in just numbers, right? Just mass.
Yeah, they said it's better to go once a month and just shut them down.
Yeah, I agree. And you think if there's just hypothetically they arrange for like 2 or 3 coaches from Camp Out to go to and sab a local hunt, and literally 200-300 people all turn up ready to go, the hunt would just go home, and it would send such a strong message of, hang on a minute, they can mobilise. For the first time ever, it's not a handful, it's hundreds.
Yeah, Linda, I see your question. We'll come back to that after 10, if that's okay.
You see, the only problem is I think they tried this from Camp Out.
Well, they did their first outreach last year, or I think it was the first time they did it anyway. I know they did outreach last year in Oxford, and that was quite successful. They got about 60-odd people to go, which is probably their busiest ever. So, like, it can be good.
Oh yes. I mean, I'm. Yeah, it's great they got 60. I mean,
it could have been. Yeah, I mean, if you think about how many people go to Camp Out,
1,000 people go.
Yeah, it's still.
Yeah, well, from that point of view, it's not so great, is it? 60 out of 15,000.
No, it's not. It's really not. But what I'm saying is the fact that the capacity now exists, it might have just been a fact that they were testing it out and they only put one coach on that had a maximum seating capacity of 60, right? Well, this year, hopefully, if that was a success last year, they might put 2-3 coaches on. But I don't know why that sort of stuff isn't encouraged anyway.
It would be. I mean, I don't know what the situation. Because, of course, now, during the summer months, it's mink hunting. And I don't know what the situation is with mink hunting, to what extent that's still continuing. We know that fox hunting is still continuing.
Yeah, they're far fewer too, so they might be a long way away.
It would, yeah, because, I mean, back in the day, there were only about half a dozen mink hunting packs in the country. There were very much fewer than the fox hunts, even going back to the 1970s.
Yeah. Well, that one that happens at Great Olm, not too far away from us, that's only a yearly thing. They only go out once a year. It's about this sort of time. I know it's the middle of summer, but that's only once a year. Yeah.
So that's, what, is that put forward as pest control then or something?
No, it's still an annual hunt. It's still like the whole village come out and clap them as they walk down the road towards the river. But it's just a yearly event.
Yeah, one of the most depressing things for a vegan to see, isn't it?
It's horrible, yeah. Because they really, I mean, it's not a very big village, it's not a very big place, and it's almost like everybody comes out, even the kids.
It's like the Boxing Day fox hunts, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Just not as many people, but same.
And everybody's saluting and doffing their caps and acting like a complete arsehole.
Yeah, they're basically like saluting and cheerleading people that are going off to hopefully murder someone or. multiple someones.
Well, it would be regarded as a tradition, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, yeah. And they advertise it for a couple of weeks before it happens, and they put all like banners and things up and that sort of stuff. Like, it's a really big thing there.
I'm wondering to what extent they seriously hunt, though, when they get to the river.
Yeah, there's an event very much like that in Ireland. And,
I don't know. I mean, it must be fairly serious, because the only year that I can really remember it vividly happening, I was working as a window cleaner over there, and there was a big argument that we had to kind of help dissolve a little bit between probably 20 different blokes, because there was 4 or 5 fishermen on the river, and they kicked off about the dogs, and the huntsman kicked off about the fishermen, and they got into a bit of a scrap, and we were kind of like dragged over to intervene as being 3 blokes.
Between two
the two different types of oppressor were fighting one another over access to the river, because the fishermen were pissed off that the dogs had ruined their fishing, and the hunters were pissed off that the fishing rods were in the river.
You should have just let them at it, Andy, and then call an ambulance.
Yeah, let them kill it.
I wasn't even vegetarian at this point. I was probably only about 20, 21, something like that. But I remember it happening. Yeah.
You see, the thing is that even if it's not wasn't their intention, to kill another animal, even if they weren't serious about killing a mink, the disruption to the to animals living in that habitat along the rivers has been really considerable, with all those dogs going along there, and all the all the hunt people and all the followers going along the river. That would have caused tremendous disruption to any animals living there where that was their home, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Right, so we ought to move on. Hang on, I'm just replying to Callum about
good thing we're not animals.
Yeah,
who isn't?
We are.
Who isn't?
Now, Ronnie,
everybody that can currently hear
Ronnie.
my voice is an animal.
Yeah, Ronnie. I want to move on to this issue of Bob Martins, because I found this quite interesting. But first of all, explain to me your morning sabbing. I mean, what time did you start, for example?
Well, the hunts normally started, I think, around about 10 in the morning. That would be the meat of the hunt, which would
11. I think it was 11.
It might have been 11. I think that, maybe some was. You might be right. It might have been more 11. It was around that 10, 11 o'clock. Perhaps they varied. And it was usually at a pub. And we'd find out. I think at the time, way back in the 1970s, they used to advertise.
Yeah,
where they were gonna meet, so it's quite easy to find out.
Yeah, they soon stopped that though, didn't they?
Yeah, and well, it became harder to find out, and I think people kind of had to, use various means to find out about the meats of the hunts.
They would send a meat card out to their support.
Yeah, that's right. They did that, but I mean, I think at the time I started sabbing, it was a lot easier to find out where they were going to be, and I mean, obviously, we probably have to start off, perhaps an hour or two before that to get to the, where the hunt was meeting. I mean, I lived in Luton.
What I'm getting at though, Ronnie, is that because we used to start earlier than that. We used to get up. I think we were getting up at 5:30, 6, because we used to do a lot of pre-spraying. Did you not do that?
I think we did. We did sometimes. Yes. It kind of depended. It kind of depended on. Because what I used to do, we used to go out in my little Mini, and on like a Thursday evening, where I was living, I had a bed sit in Luton, and in the on the first floor, and on the ground floor there was a payphone, and I'd phone up the like the local SABs and find out who could come, and I think a lot of it depended on what time they were available, whether they'd be available early enough to go and do the. Yeah,
I remember going around Liverpool knocking people up.
That stuff, yeah. So it would all depend on that, what we were going to do.
Yeah. So if you talk about pre-spraying, so I mean, we were doing the Essex at the time, and because we had an infiltrator into the hunt, we knew we had one of their meat cards, and we knew where they were going, and as soon as you saw the name of the meat, you knew exactly the route that they were gonna go, which is why I was able to do it myself on a bike, because you knew that they would go to this cover. Cover is a hunting term for wood. they'd go to that cover and then that cover and then that cover. So we used to go to those and spray them systematically. So whenever the hounds were entered into a cover, they would get an alternative scent to the fox. So we used to use something called Bob Martin's, right, Ronnie?
Yeah, it was called, well Bob Martin's is it's called Anti-Mate.
Anti-Mate.
And basically what
I was going to say Bob Martin is a make still of like
it's
flea
a brand,
and worm
yes.
powder, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a brand.
Yeah.
And it was like a spray. It was kind of aerosol
Yeah, they
spray.
were put under loads of pressure by the hunts to stop reducing.
Well, you see, the thing is, it was produced to. It was basically, I think, the main ingredient of it was lemongrass.
Right.
It's very strongly smelling, like kind of herbal
Well,
scent.
the clue is also in the name. It was to put around the private parts of female.
Well, it was
dogs.
on their. You'd spray it on their lower back of a female dog. So if a male dog came along, so
they'd already potentially made sure that it was strong enough to affect the dog's sense of smell.
That's right. Yeah. So the male dog wouldn't smell that the female was on heat. And that was,
so we would do a pre-spray, and the best weather for a pre-spray was kind of fairly cold, misty, and then when you would spray, the anti-mate would just kind of hover in the bushes and
Yes.
hover almost like at nose height for the hounds. So that was kind of perfect. And then what we tried to do, because in Liverpool at least, anti-mate got quite rare, and I don't know whether that was because they were trying to put restrictions in as a result of pressure from the hunt, but it became quite rare, and so we started to experiment with other things. Like, for example, we had a big barrel full of garlic, right, and we would kind of let it rot for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then we would turn up at the meat. And this was a real dangerous thing to do, of course. Turn up at the meet in a transit van, open the back doors, and then just kind of tip the barrel over so all the garlic went crashing into the car park where all the hounds were, right? And so they couldn't kind of smell anything for ages then after that.
Yeah, we sometimes used to make our own, and I think that would be. I think it was kind of quite similar to the anti-mate, only it was like a homemade version that we'd make sometimes, and use that. It's just, I think, really because it was cheaper, and you could use like a big garden sprayer to spray it rather than a small spray can.
Would you say that citronella or lemongrass are potentially the more potent smell? Because I don't know. I mean, now that you've said it, lemongrass makes a whole bunch of sense, but I've never known anyone use anything.
Yeah, citronella was the main ingredient.
Citronella, that's right. It's similar. Yeah, it's a similar
Andy,
thing.
where's this sound pollution coming from?
Don't know, what is it?
It's almost like it's like everybody's underwater for me. It's got all these bubbling sounds. You two can't hear it, no?
I can hear it.
Don't know. It's not my fan, is it?
Oh, it's gone now.
Gone now.
Oh, I have no idea. I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, it's kind of got a little like this all the time. Yeah.
No. That's gone now. Yeah, but that's
sounds like somebody boiling
basically
water and stuff.
citronella. That's right. It was, but I've got a funny story about anti-mate, and that
You
is.
would.
Yeah, funny. Well, what it was myself and we'd been out sabbing, myself and a pal of mine from Newton, and we were on a bus. We got on a bus. I can't quite remember what we were doing on the bus, but we were sat together on the bus, and there was a little boy sat in front of us with his mum. And he started saying to his mum, was going, "Mummy, mummy, mummy, that man behind has got dog bum stuff on him." She said, "Oh, be quiet, be quiet." He said, No, he's got dog bum stuff on him. And because he could smell, because obviously we smelt of anti-mate, and this little boy could smell it. I made up some story. I said, "Oh yeah, we've got a female dog at home who's on heat," sort of thing. I think that's what I told her. I didn't say that we'd been sabbing. But
You missed an opportunity there for a bit of education.
yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, but you see, I think
You not give him a flyer.
well, we didn't have any on us. You didn't have any
Yeah,
on.
that's so
I think,
disappointing.
yeah, I think he, I think they must have had a female dog at home, and that's why he recognised.
Yeah, I recognise as well.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Now, quite often they sell like a pair of like clip-on pants that does the same job.
You'd have to go around and put them all up, put one on it, every single one of the foxhounds, wouldn't you?
That'd be difficult.
Well, yeah, especially with the hunt trying to whip you at the same time.
Yeah, well, the problem is they get punished as well for not doing their job properly. So
They do, yeah. But is it time for my second arsehole story?
Second arsehole story, yeah, I think it's.
What it was
How could we hold you back, Ronnie?
you can't, no, especially if it's to do with arseholes. No, what it was it was I think it might have been the following fox hunting season when I was kind of sort of running my own group of sabs, and we'd have meetings. We'd have a meeting every week in a local pub, to plan what we were going to do. And we were having a meeting, and this one of the guys that was in the group, he kind of was came into the meeting very crestfallen and depressed, and he told us, he said I can't believe what's just happened. He'd recently got a job at a pub. He'd been out of work for a while. He managed to get a job at a pub, and then he found out that the hunt were meeting at the pub where he worked, and he was going to have to serve them the stirrup cups. What they do is when a hunt meet at a pub, they all get served. I don't know whether it's brandy or something like that before they go hunting. They get someone from the pub comes out with the trays with this drink on, and they all drink it. They're sat on horseback drinking this alcohol, stirrup cups, and this is what had happened to him. And he said, I don't know what to do. He said, I feel like refusing to do it, but it'll mean I'll lose my job, and it's taken me ages to get this job. So anyway, I devised a cunning plan. I got him some liquid laxative, and I said to him, what you want to do is put some of this into all the stirrup cups, when you're doing, serving them the stirrup cups. And anyway, so he said, yeah, okay, I'll, if I can do it, if I get away with it, I'll do it. Anyway, at our next meeting, he came in like all delighted, and what had happened is he'd managed to do it, and the hunt was cancelled because basically they all shut themselves.
I knew it was going to be one of your shitty stories, right?
Yeah. So it's a shame that doesn't happen more often, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, no hint, nudge, nudge. Anyone listening?
Yeah. So Ronnie, do you want to explain what cubbing is?
Well, basically, what happens is, I think the fox hunting season kind of proper, when they chases the foxes across the country and all that, I think starts in around about November, but sort of from perhaps late July, early August onwards, they hunt do something called cubbing, which is basically training the young hounds to get a taste of blood, to get them all fired up to hunt the foxes. And basically, what a hunt do is they'll during the night they'll go into wood, where foxes have their earths, and they'll block up the earths. And the foxes are out. The foxes are out hunting. The kind of adult foxes are out hunting with the cubs. Sort of showing the cubs how to get their food and everything. But when they come back to the earths to go underground, when it's getting towards morning, they can't, because the hunt have blocked the earths up. And then what the hunt do is they surround the woods with with hunt supporters, some of them mounted on horses and some of them on foot, who make a lot of noise, so that the foxes are frightened to kind of run out of the wood. And then they send the hounds into the wood, I think some adult hounds and the young hounds as well.
Yeah,
So
it's almost like the diametric opposition to hunting, is it?
It
Because
is,
they want
and
to actually,
basically, there's no chase.
they trap the foxes in rather than
They
letting
trap
them run.
them in, and it's just a massacre, and it's just to give the give the young hounds a taste of blood. And it was, and the problem was, it's like really really difficult to sab because normally hunt sabbing is the tactics of the hunt sabs are to sort of interfere with the chase. In other words, to lay false trails or to
there isn't a chase to interfere.
And there's
with.
no chase.
I mean, literally, the only way that you can sab cubbing really is to remove the blockage as soon as it's put there in that tiny little window before the fox gets.
Yeah,
past.
that's right. Yeah, if you're able to,
And that's it, pretty much. Yeah,
you knew where they were going, and you could kind of do that.
Yeah.
But I think because we turn up at some of these things, and there's nothing we could do because we'd be massively outnumbered by all these hunt people.
Well, there was something we tried to do in Liverpool. I just moved up from Essex, right? And this is Dave Callender and Fiona Hughes, and they were saying to us, look, you can't get away with doing what you did in Essex up north because the northern hunts are a lot more violent. So then there was this cubbing thing, and so we managed to get into the cover, the wood, with the foxes and the hounds. And so we thought that if we poured neat Bob Martins on the back of the hounds, it would give the foxes some kind of chance, right? And so we were running around in this cover, and of course that meant that we were kind of running in circles, really. And then suddenly, loads of hunt heavies started chasing us and everything. And I was kind of rugby tackled and manhandled too, and I was kind of thrown into this ditch, which was, kind of virtually dry. And there was one guy saying to me, if you don't get out of this cover, I'm going to kill you. And another guy saying, if you come out of that cover, I'm going to kill you. And I thought, I thought, well, this is not a great choice. And I eventually came out, and I remember distinctly, I can visualize it now. There was a woman, one of the supporters, with a babe in arms, and she was looking over, completely horrified at what was going on, right? And I'm sure that she kind of saved me, really. And they kind of spotted that this woman was looking, like as a witness kind of thing. And so they said, well, we'll let you off kind of thing. We're just going to, I think they said something like, they're going to prosecute me for something. They're going to call the police. And I said, well, please call the police, because the only person that has broken the law so far is you, right? Mm. So they were kind of frog marching me away, and then allegedly to the police, and then they just said, piss off kind of thing, because they knew that they were the ones who did wrong.
Yeah.
But I was really lucky that woman was.
Yeah, very lucky that she was.
Really worried. Really lucky, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of people that we are potentially talking about.
Yes, indeed. Right. So, what's the time? We've still got 10 minutes, Ronnie. You haven't got a third arsehole story. So,
No, that's all of them used up.
All out of arseholes.
Yeah, you're completely out of arseholes. So,
Yes.
Another thing that I did. This was on a beagle hunt. So this is hare hunting. The person who used to organise the SABs in Merseyside was called Dave Callender, and his then wife Fiona Callender, now Fiona Hughes. And he for some reason he got an injunction. He was always getting arrested, Davey. I think he ended up getting 10 years, didn't he, Ronnie? For ALF things. And
he did get some sort of sentence. I can't remember how long.
No, it was 10 years. Yeah, and so we kind of rocked up because Christmas time was our busiest time, because there's like hunts all the time. About 2 or 3 days apart, quite often. And we rocked up, and so we were kind of walking through these fields, trying to kind of catch up with the hunt, and suddenly these kind of 3 skinheads turned up, with these big kind of greatcoat, green greatcoats and everything. And they came over and they went, "Hey, come on, we're on your side." And we didn't know whether they were telling us the truth or not, right? We thought the hunt might have paid them to kind of take us down some dark alley somewhere and do us in. And so we came up to a gate separating two fields, and the hunters were across this gate linking arms, right? So we approached them, not knowing what to do and still not knowing whether the skinheads were on our side or not. And then suddenly we got close, and these skinheads, all three of them, they got these hockey sticks out of their coats, right? And they started kind of threatening the hunts with it. And of course, the hunt just kind of dissolved. All their resolve about stopping us from going from one field to another kind of went. And so the day went on, and it would appear that they were on our side. And so they said, "Well, when's the next one?" And we said, "Well, actually, in a couple of days." And they said, "Great, we'll come along with our van, right?" And so they come along about 2 days later with a van, and it was like a small van, smaller than a transit van. And I swear to God, about 12 skinheads got out the back of it. I don't know how they fitted in there. And they were all kind of lined up, and the hunt were meeting, and the skinheads were kind of going, "You're going to get your heffing heads kicked in," and this kind of stuff. And it was really kind of weird. And then the skinheads went into this little kind of, opening where there was a tree, and they started smashing this tree up to get weapons. And this guy, this Sab, I think his name was Craig it was. He said, "Don't you think we should stop them?" I said, "Well, how are we going to do that, right?" And so the hunt starts, and before the hunt started proper, the heavies of the hunt, who was always giving us grief, were kind of eyeing up the skinheads, and the skinheads were kind of eyeing up them, kind of, "Oh yeah." And then when they met out in the field, the skinheads would kind of go, "There they are," and tanked off after the heavies, who ran off, right? Which is obviously not what they would normally do if they were Savs. And so it was a snowy day, and they then started pelting the trees with snowballs, which meant that that the snow was raining down on the hunt. So the hunt cancelled, right? And so we thought, wow, we've got a pretty decent weapon here, right? And then said, "So when's the next one?" And then this is where it all went wrong, because we've got the reputation of being the violent ones, right? They said, "Okay, well, the next one, we'll bring the sawn-off shotguns with us." And we're going, no, don't do that, right? And everything. And so we had to break off contact with them, because it was kind of escalating out of our control.
It was getting to the point where it's turned into warfare.
it was just so weird. But the weird thing was, it was so effective. I mean, they actually shut the hunt down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we had an incident where when I
Well, you know what, Ronnie? You're going to have to upgrade your spoon for a hockey stick.
Oh, I know. Yeah, my spoon. We use a hockey stick to push leaflets through letterbox. Yeah. But
you've never lived until you've had vegan yogurt with a hockey stick.
I wonder if they played hockey in their spare time. Then these skinheads, they were members of the skinhead hockey team.
I seriously doubt that, Ronnie.
I mean, they might have got some exercise using hockey sticks, but I don't think they were sticking to the rules.
Jolly hockey sticks. Though we had when I was involved in North London Sabs, our nearest hunt was something called the Enfield Chase, and the master of the Enfield Chase was a famous at the time television show jumping commentator called Raymond Brooks Ward. And what he did, because we were constantly sabbing this hunt, and he employed, he actually paid this gang of guys that kind of called themselves the Hunt Protection Squad to protect the hunt from the Sabs, and they would kind of come looking for the Sabs to sort of beat us up and that sort of thing. And there was one week where for some reason or not, I didn't go sabbing, but the other lads did, and they ended up being roughed up and thrown into the nettles and stuff by this Hunt Protection Squad. So anyway, one of the guys in the SAB groups had some mates in a karate club. So he got them next time we went sabbing, he got them to come out with us, you see. And anyway, we pulled up, and there's a row of cars that we were in, and the front two or three of them, they had the karate club guys in. And anyway, we pulled up, and all these guys from the Hunt Protection Squad, these hunt thugs, hunt heavies, came running down the road to attack the cars. But when they got level with us, the doors of all these vehicles opened, and these karate guys got out and just started chopping them all over the place and doing the karate kicks and all that on them.
Chopping them all over the place. Is that
chopping them, doing the karate chop, the karate chops and all the karate stuff. You're chopping it.
So it sounded like
you are a stickler for technical language, Ronnie.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the karate thing. And all these guys, they just fled. All these hunt thugs just fled.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we couldn't always get the karate guys to come out with us. Sadly,
it was the chopping.
Yeah, they did. Weren't able to do the chopping every week.
Chopping and chopping.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're coming up to 5 minutes, folks. What have you got left in your locker, Ronnie?
Well, in terms of the hunt sabs, I'm just trying to think. I mean, we actually. I mean, the hunt sabs had quite a strict sort of non-violence policy because in the North London sabs, we had a policy that we defend ourselves. We said, right, look, we're not going to start trouble. We're not going to attack the hunt. But if they attack us, we're going to defend ourselves,
Yeah.
and we are going to use physical force to defend ourselves as it comes to that. And so because of that, we got kind of sort of ostracized by a lot of sab groups. And when they had these, they used to have these kind of joint hits where, a number of subgroups would combine and take action against the hunt.
Yeah, they were amazing, those were.
And very often we weren't invited because we were considered to be non-violent, considered to be too violent. And that was just because we were prepared to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
No, but I mean, you guys have both spoken to Sam Morley before, haven't you? I've sabbed with him a few times, and he's very much like on the offensive sort of sabbing. But like at the end of the day, it's really effective because he kind of inspires others to do the same. And you would be surprised that you can quite often, even if you're significantly outnumbered, just by showing a bit of assertiveness and saying, "Well, no, we're not going to be chased. We're going to chase you," actually makes a whole bunch of difference.
It does. I tell you what worked in Essex before I moved to Liverpool is the Essex group was great because it was run by women, and they organised everything, and we started to have this policy, right? Whereas if the hunt got heavy, the women would surround the men, right? And because they were all kind of macho arseholes, the hunt wouldn't kind of fight their way through women to get to the men. Yeah, and then we had another policy. Smart tactic. I mean, yeah, we had another
dangerous, but yeah,
of silence. So what we learned was that often the hunt supporters and followers, they would try to engage you with arguments and stuff, and that's because then you couldn't concentrate on what's going on because you've got to concentrate because a hunt can disappear in seconds. You've got to really concentrate. Yeah. And so we had this silence policy. And so, you would get, the landowner coming over, get off my land and all that kind of stuff. And we wouldn't speak to them. We wouldn't respond to them. They would go purple with rage because they were used to Sabs arguing with them, right? And we just almost pretended they weren't there. And we just whispered to each other in terms of what we wanted to do and all that kind of stuff. And they went absolutely mental about it, right? They were really, really upset because I suppose the people of that kind of social class, they weren't used to the, the plebs ignoring them. And so, they were really, really upset. And so we took a Daily Mail, I think it was a Daily Mail reporter with us to a hunt where this policy was in play. And I always remember the photographer that they brought. He looked about 14, this poor lad, right? I don't know how old he was, but he looked about 14. And he was shaking like a leaf, this guy. And so we were in the fields and all that, and the hunts come over, get off my land and all that kind of stuff. And of course, we wouldn't speak to them, but the reporter from the paper would, and went over and said, hello, I'm a reporter and all that from so-and-so, so-and-so. Can I ask you your name? And he said something like, F off and bollocks or something, and rode away. And she said, well, thank you, Mr. Bollocks. And then there was a double page spread in the paper that was absolutely ripping the hunt apart, which we photocopied and took back the next week and gave it out to all the hunters, including the master.
Oh, nice.
And he was really, really upset. And there was almost like a kind of agreement then that they kind of said, well, look, what we'll do with the sabs is just see them as another obstacle to get to the fox. And so it was almost like a weird kind of agreement that came into force, that we would do our sabbing and the hunt wouldn't get violent. They would just go, well, we've got to catch the wily fox, and we've also got to get around the sabs. Right. So I don't know whether you ever had that, Ronnie, but it worked for us.
I think there were some hunts that kind of regarded it as a bit of a game in a sense. But you see, I was concerned that there were sabs that looked at it in the same way, in a sense that they kind of. I never enjoyed sabbing. I used to go because I wanted to save the fox, but it was something I didn't like it either. I
disliked it. I don't enjoy sabbing.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it.
And I don't like violence, whether it's one witnessing it or defending any of it. I don't like it. So, why would you go to a situation where you're almost certain it's going to occur?
But it's almost like, some sabs seem to have this strange fascination with kind of all the hunting terms and everything.
Well, they're the ones who might go over, though, weren't they, Ronnie?
Well, I mean, that has happened. Well, people have gone both ways. There's been anti-hunt people that have gone over to the side of the hunt, and there's been hunting people that have gone, come over to the side of the anti-hunt. More really than in any other area of the oppression of other animals, that kind of seems to happen with hunting for some reason. And
I suppose it's because there's not the same level of indoctrination like there would be if you grew up as like a child on a farm, for example. But you've got as much hands-on witnessing brutality and death, haven't you? So I suppose it makes quite a lot of sense. I mean, I've mentioned it before that there's a Reddit post that I remember reading through where there was probably 300 or 400 stories that all talked about the most traumatic day of their childhood. And I reckon about 70% were their first hunting experience, which is really telling.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, we had a guy in our subgroup who was fascinated with all the terms they used, the different, the hunting language and everything. And I couldn't understand that. I said, why are you so fascinated with that? We don't need to do that. All that. We just go out there and try and stop them killing the fox, don't we? That's what it's all about. Why is it, but he had a fascination with it. And then he started to kind of, go along to hunts, to sort of infiltrate hunts. He kind of was, started to do undercover work. And I think he supplied information to the League Against Cruel Sports, from his undercover work. And then he went over to the side of the hunt. I think that was connected with his fascination with all of it for some reason. We
had a guy like that in Liverpool, because there was a guy, he was like a double agent. He was kind of like, you could never tell which side he was on. Yeah. But I do remember the time when I was kind of surrounded by these hunt people, and he came steaming in with a kind of, it wasn't a branch, it was like a tree trunk. He kind of like run in with his tree trunk and scattered all the hunters away from me, which meant that I could escape. So he kind of helped me escape. But he used to go to the hunt as a hunt supporter too. It was all very bizarre.
Yeah, it's strange. There was quite a lot of that, and I think that there's this. Sometimes there was this kind of strange camaraderie between the Sabs and the hunters. Like they'd know they'd be on first name terms with the master of the hunt.
Oh, I never experienced that one anyway.
Yeah, and kind of were friendly with the hunt. And I'd say, why are you so friendly with these people? They're going out to kill animals. What's the matter with you? And they said, oh, well, if we keep friendly with them, it's kind of it makes it easier for us. But I intensely dislike that.
Well, that's because you were in that violent group, Ronnie.
Yeah. Well, it's just that you kind of don't you don't give them that respect. Okay, you don't have to attack them or shout at them or anything like that, but you don't need to be friendly to them. And I really didn't like that at all.
No, I can totally understand it. Yeah. Right, we're past 10. So
can you remember Linda's question, or do I need to
I've got it right in front of me. Okay. Do you think the present vegan society will challenge this government on animal rights?
No.
Question mark.
Answer a bit more in depth than that.
I mean, what they've done. I mean, they're all. I think the vegan side have already put forward, like a course of action that they want the government to take. But I didn't see.
What is it? What is it, Ronnie?
It's about it's basically kind of plant-based future type stuff. It's about kind of supporting farmers to transition away from animal agriculture.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
And that's okay, but it's not. Obviously, that doesn't mention animal rights, and it's to do with diet.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not terrible in what it's suggesting, because it is asking for support, basically financially and kind of in terms of infrastructure to help people transition, but it is all based around a plant-based future. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So no, I don't think they'll talk about.
There's no mention of rights or anything like that, to be honest. No,
but that's always the point. What we've got to do is we've got to make it clear that the political arena is not the place for animal rights. They can't deal with animal rights, which is why everything ends up as animal welfare. And so even the big manifesto that created the problem with the Barry Horn and the hunger strike and everything, that was actually an animal welfare manifesto. I mean, it had welfare in the bloody name and everything. You cannot get animal rights from a politician.
No, I agree. And obviously, for the most part,
radical.
They're going to interpret rights legally too. That's what their thought's going to be, and the implications of that are enormous. So yeah, they're not going to think about it as like a basic inherent right or a sort of a negative right. They're not going to look at it like that. Their first thought will be like Mary Warnock, like a legal right.
Well, yeah, that's right. But all you got to do is think, okay, I'm a politician, and somebody wants me to promote animal rights. How the hell do I do that? And it's literally not possible.
Well, it's not possible when you've got when they're virtually all speciesists and human supremacists, the other politicians, and so they're not going to go. They're not going to go down that road. They're not going to. Want to promote animal liberation.
Yeah, which is why it slides into welfare, and so then they hook up with the welfare groups because it's the only language they kind of understand. They understand animal welfare, this kind of like tidying things up, regulating this, regulating that. But animal rights is far too fundamental and radical for politicians.
Well, you see, welfare doesn't challenge human supremacism. No, basically, these people are human supremacists, and so that's what we've got to challenge. We've got to build a culture that rejects human supremacism, and only through doing that will we get politicians who themselves reject it and who will be prepared to put in, I
mean, even now, I think people are saying, well, there's probably about 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 vegans in Parliament, but what are they able to do?
Well, you see, and also I kind of question in what sense they're vegan. I mean, I was listening to an interview or the first part of an interview Carla Denyer, who's one of the leaders of the Green Party, who's vegan. They're both vegan. She and Adrian Ramsey, who's the other co-lead, they both were elected to Parliament at the last election, which I was very pleased about. But in her interview with, it was at one of the Veg Fests, the Bristol Veg Fest, I think maybe last year, did an interview with Tim Barford, and I listened to the start of it, and her reasons for sort of being vegan, as she says, aren't to do with animal liberation. It's to do with the environment. She's not an animal liberationist vegan, and I think this is one of the problems, that it's not the fundamental reason for kind of being vegan. That's not why these people claim to be vegan. A lot of them, it's still human supremacist. It's what we'll do is we avoid animal products because that's better for the planet, and therefore better for us humans that inhabit the planet. It's human centric. It's a human centric viewpoint. It's human centric veganism, which isn't really veganism at all.
Yeah, but I mean that's the only type that would even operate within politics. That's the point, isn't it?
Well, at the moment, yes. At the moment, yes, it would, because you're dealing with people who are all human supremacists and are looking out for,
So, Andy, have you seen any others? There's an interesting one from Keeley just in, but is there anything before that?
I don't think there was anything before that.
Well, Keeley's asking
I remember the one from Linda, but I don't remember any others.
Yeah, well,
if we have missed them, please feel free to retype them.
Yeah, we've answered the Linda one. Keeley's talking about gimmicks. I don't know what gimmicks. Is that
you will be aware, so maybe not so much Ronnie, but certainly on TikTok lives at the moment, and possibly for all I know on some other places, there is this growing trend of kind of theatrics and engineering.
This is weird, isn't it?
Attention and gifts, whilst at the same time completely reducing veganism to a mockery, basically.
Yeah, have a listen to this, Ronnie. You won't believe this.
So yeah, I mean, there's a number of people now that are essentially pretending to cry, pretending to do all sorts, showing like fake rage, and pretending to make all kinds of noises like they're smashing their room up in response to like comments, all to kind of like reverse psychology engineer gifts from people. Like, please don't send me any more dogs because it'll make me really sad. So someone sends a dog, and then they pretend to slam their hand on the table to send another dog. It's just fucking nonsense. But it's like, it's so disrespectful to everything that everyone in here potentially does. And so yeah, I suppose I wanted to pose the question that in all your years of vegan activism, have you ever felt the need to reduce this to some sort of joke or mockery or gimmick?
Well, no, obviously not. Absolutely.
No, short answer, no, yeah.
Yeah, so why on earth are people in 2024 with access to all this information, and it's never been easier for people, and this is what they're resorting to?
Well, because is it because they want money? Is it because they?
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean,
money and attention. Yeah, there can't be any other means, because it's not effective, and obviously it makes everything that everybody else does look stupid and very difficult to kind of correct these misnomers. Because obviously these people then come into our lives, like I've already seen in the comment section tonight, and just expect the same thing.
Yeah, it's more over the top than the vegan teacher, but I mean, like. It's kind of really weird the way that they carry on, but it seems to be about making money and this reverse psychology. Don't send me any gifts because that would upset me, and then people send them gifts. It's all a bit weird to me. I'm too old to get it.
I think a lot of it stems from the vegan teacher, though. Obviously, there's people taking it to other extremes now and doing their own versions and their own kind of gimmicks, I suppose. But it all began with her, I think.
Well, there's one guy who insists on mispronouncing the word vegan, doesn't he?
Oh, vegan. You mean vegan Samaritan?
Yeah, and then there's now this guy that you introduced me to, which was kind of almost like a bit mind-blowing, called the Vegan King, right? And he's got a crown on his head and everything, but he kind of like, if you do anything that he doesn't like, he kind of like has a tantrum on air, and looks as though he's smashing stuff up. So how he does that, I'm not quite sure. But it's all a bit kind of performative.
It's all performative, yeah.
But the weird thing, right, Andy, about that is that if you look through his channel, his actual posts rather than his lives are fairly. I mean, it's all full of animal lover and all that kind of welfare stuff, but it's actually fairly rational compared with his lives.
His lives used to be all right once upon a time, you know. Before he adopted this gimmick idea.
Is this all about money then, is it, you think?
I don't know whether it's money or whether it's attention or whether it's the promise of growth, but it all comes from the vegan teacher tree.
And can you make money out of
with her and their
TikTok?
pod system, you kind of want to replicate what she does.
I mean, is it even possible to make an income out of TikTok?
It is, yeah, if you're popular enough, but it's a very inner. I mean, if you want to make a personal career out of it, then yeah, absolutely, you can be successful. I think it's very difficult if you want to do it in some of these ways that they're being sort of proclaimed. And well, all this money gets raised for an animal charity. Well, 70% of it goes to TikTok. So it's a really inefficient way of raising money for a charity. You'd be far better off directing them to the charity and letting people donate there and then.
Yeah, you see, Ronnie and I have talked about this. Well, we talked about this months and months ago because it never occurred to us, did it, Ronnie, to make money out of the movement or to even become famous or anything?
No, absolutely not. No, and this is like, and you never had any wealthy vegans back in the day. At all, we kind of live hand to mouth because we were dedicating ourselves to campaigning. But
then there's also that particularly thing about the particularly the British kind of welfare system was kind of like in our favour because it was around the time when Thatcher had come in. And she made a lot of people unemployed on purpose, including me. I was working for Ford's motor company, and I was one of the first ones, last ones in, first ones out. And what sociologically we call that is that Thatcher created a reserve army of labour. Now, a reserve army of labour is a lot of unemployed people. So there's about 3 million unemployed people.
Yes.
And what that does is pressurise the people who have got very low wages. Don't complain, don't kick off. Otherwise, we'll just fire you and get one of these 3 million in.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, what happened was because there were so many people unemployed, they kind of, the people at the Dole office, because obviously in those days it's all done online now. But what you had to do was it started off at being every week, and then it went to every 2 weeks, and possibly, longer than that. In the end, you had to go to the Dole office to sign on, to say that you were kind of, I suppose, sort of looking for work, wasn't it? Really, you had to sign on, but they didn't. And that would entitle you then to unemployment benefit. But they didn't put any pressure on you to find work, because they knew that the number of people that were unemployed far exceeded the number of jobs that were available. So no pressure to work. So if somebody, was prepared to live frugally enough to survive on the money they got from unemployment benefit, there was no pressure on those people to work. You see, so completely different. Today,
so we were kind of like full-time activists, but it was the government who paid us.
It was the government, because I remember an interview I did it when I was this would have been probably, I would say probably in the early 80s, and there'd been an ALF action down in the sort of southeast London area, I think, or East London area, and the sort of regional television station. I got invited down there to be interviewed by one of their reporters, and he thought he was being clever because he said to me, "Now, Mr. Lee, how much does the ALF pay you for being their press officer?" And I said, "Oh no, the ALF don't pay me. The government pays me." He said, "What do you mean the government pays me?" I said, "Well, I'm on unemployment benefit." I said, "So the government pay me to do this job?" I said, "So they should, because they give enough money to the people who, to the people who exploit animals. They give enough money to the animal farmers and the animal experimenters. So quite rightly, they should be paying me money to be the ALF press officer." And he was completely gobsmacked, this guy. But that was the case, yeah. We were paid by the government to,
I had like 2.5 years of paid activism, if you want to look at it in that sense, because I was signing on.
Yeah, and it was never. And of course, the other thing was that
not a lot of money though.
No, you've got to be, you have to live pretty frugally.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But we were prepared to do that, and because our main focus was on activism, we weren't sort of going out places and doing things that really required a lot of money. I mean, I lived in for some while I was living in a squat in North London, and obviously, we weren't paying any rent and we were living there, and it was that kind of thing. And if you did rent a place, you'd get housing benefit because you were unemployed, so that was paid for as well. So
yeah, but the difference is it wasn't kind of jet set activism. You weren't flying around everywhere.
No, it was just local. I mean, it was like with me, it'd be Hunt Sub, and it would be ALF activity, which was always fairly nearby. We we'd travel 100 miles away to do it. It was always fairly local. And
did they pay the housing benefit on your high-end London apartment? Or?
Yes, I know. Well,
your penthouse.
Well, I think the street. There was this one road in North London where I lived, and this would have been in the kind of mid 1970s, I think, where almost the whole of the street was squatted. This one street, and but now it's really quite a posh area.
Well, one thing I remember, Ronnie, is that there's a lot of talk about full-time activism now, but I just remember waking up, and I was living with the Calendars, and the John Page was there, and Robin Smith in Manchester, and all the rest of it, and we get up, and the first thing you do is animal rights stuff until it went dark and you went to sleep.
Yeah, it's full time. Yeah, that was your life. You just lived it. Really.
Yeah, there was no holidays because we weren't rich enough to go on holiday.
Yeah, you didn't take a day off because the people
we used to go. The only holiday that I went on, and I went a couple of times, was that there was someone in the Hunt Sabs. He knew, or he or she knew, I can't remember. Somebody down in Cornwall, near Loo in Cornwall, who had a big holiday. It was a big house that they'd rent out, for holidays, and they'd let us have this really cheaply, and so we'd all put so much in, and we'd kind of rent this place, and it was one of these places where I suppose it was normally meant for about 6 people. There were 3 bedrooms. That's maybe 3 couples normally, but maybe about 20 of us used to go down there, and that some people were lucky enough to have the rooms, the rest of us just slept in sleeping bags on the floor. And we'd all go, we'd all have this Hunt Sabs holiday, but it was a working holiday.
Yeah, it was always like a busman's holiday, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'd be going out. We'd go out in we'd hire a boat and go out. I remember myself and this other guy, we were pulling up the lobster pots and destroying lobster pots. And there were these guys fishing doing this kind of long line fishing, and we cut their line, and they chased us, and their boat was really slow, but our boat was even slower, and they were gaining. These guys were gaining us, ranting and raving and waving their fists. So they were slowly catching us.
And you were paddling, were you, Ronnie?
Well, we were sort of leaning forward so the boat went faster, and we managed to beach the boat. We got to a beach, we beached the boat, and we just ran. And then we phoned up the boat company and said, "Oh, something went wrong with the boat, and we had to beach it." And then they went and recovered it. And we just.
I remember one of my first holidays with the kids was paid by the social services, and we went to the exotic location of Rhyl in North Wales.
Oh yes,
it's kind of a holiday camp. But we had to cut the holiday short because we liberated a rabbit.
And you had to take the rabbit home.
Yeah. So
yes, So that was good. But it was and some of the people. There was like a couple of people with divers, that were involved in Hunt Sabs, and there was this net. There was this net that had been put in the sea, just to catch like a kind of gill net, just to catch fishes, and they went down. They dived down and destroyed this net, and we just did like and. I remember being in, I think it's a place called Polperro, which is next to Lou, and we'd been out having a drink, and one of the Sabs, he picked up a garden gnome. He picked up a garden gnome from someone's garden, and he threw it through a butcher shop window in this kind of shopping parade. And he ran off, and the police came. The police must have been really nearby because a couple of police officers came running. And I said, "Are you after the guy that broke the window?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "He ran up that way," and I sent them completely in the wrong direction. They went belting, in the opposite direction. So
you're a very bad man, Ronnie Lee.
So it's like we just caused total like. And on the way down there, myself and another guy, at one time we did a raid on a Hunt Kennels, and destroyed all their hunting tackle and everything. So it was like full on. Even our holidays were like activism.
So it should be.
I mean, we kind of almost like regarded the national marches as holidays, didn't we? Because it was you were stuck in Liverpool and all that, and the north, and then you got the chance to go to London, for a couple of days.
You definitely both missed a trick though. Imagine how rich you could have been if you were fronting like supplements or something from 70s onwards.
I know.
Yeah,
we never thought. We never thought about.
No, we never thought about it.
We were kind of quite happy with our financial situation.
Yeah, you were weirdly cause based as opposed to thinking, what can I get?
As long as we had enough to survive, to get food, and because we used to cook a lot of stuff from basic ingredients. So like back in the day, all these kind of processed vegan friendly foods that you get these days, they weren't available then, and you had to make everything from basic ingredients and kind of survive on things on like stir fries and stuff. But it meant it was a lot cheaper, because vegetables and getting your lentils and your beans and that, it's really cheap.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was in a squat in Manchester, right, we had this food co-op, and we Suma Whole Foods, right, they used to send a big van over from Manchester or wherever it was, Leeds it was, and they'd arrive in Manchester, and we'd unload it, and then a lot of people would come, and we'd bag it all up into different things. Then all the people from the cart would come, and like we were living on virtually nothing in terms of food. We had kind of more disposable income than most people that we knew who worked, because of cooperation. It wasn't individuals competing against it.
No. I mean, when I lived in a squat in North London, we'd some of the people in the squat were vegan, some were vegetarian, and some were like meat eaters. But we had an agreement that all the meals would be vegan, so that everyone could eat them. So we all took turns cooking, and the meals were all vegan, and virtually every meal was a stir fry. But that was okay. It was like really healthy. Yeah, really healthy and really cheap, because we'd buy in stuff all together. It would be cheaper. Get stuff in bulk and that. And so the food wasn't expensive, and it was kind of also healthier as well. And so that's how we were, and we weren't, we were able to survive. We were able to remain healthy. So and we had a roof over our head. So what more do you want than that? You know, why would you want any more than that? And we were able to spend our time, instead of spending our time as a wage slave helping someone else to make a lot of money and doing some shitty, meaningless job, we were able to spend our time doing what we want to do, which was like animal liberation activism, and still be able to remain healthy and to, you know, and to live.
Yeah, the thing is, though,
well.
we've got to admit that people couldn't do that now, right?
It would be much more difficult. I think that, you know, what happens now is you have to kind of, if you're not working, you've got to spend so many hours online looking for a job.
Yeah, but I thought Patreon was going to be the solution. Rather than people giving to one or two individuals and making them rich, I thought that they would look around the local community, see who was active, and give them money. And I used to argue, well, look, you know, the local grassroots activists, they're on Facebook and they're on all the things. You can see what they're doing virtually 24/7. Whereas you give a check to Animal Aid and Viva, you haven't got a clue what happens.
No, absolutely no. I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you, and I think that you know, this is where kind of things have changed. I mean, first of all, it's so much more difficult to live like we lived. I think you probably could still do it to some extent, but you'd have to be. It would be more complicated. It'd be more complicated because you've got to spend all this time. I mean, it doesn't mean that you've got to get a job at the end of the day. You can still avoid. You can still be clever enough to avoid work, you know, and go. You know, you can go through all the motions of.
Well, I suppose you could. I mean, people toyed with the idea of having vegan communes. The problem is, I mean, you know, sociologically, communes never worked really, and it's a shame. Really. I mean, most things that destroyed most communes was sex. Funny enough.
Yeah,
because, you know, people kind of coupling up and then splitting and then coupling.
Yes,
Yeah, of course. Well, it's those politics, isn't it? And those clashes, those personality clashes, they're always going to be an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, just on that Animal Aid note, I mean, how many grassroots groups do you reckon you could set up with 27.5 million? Because that's what they spent last year on animal welfare campaigns.
Yeah, but I'm not sure there's any really though, because we have a disempowered. Kind of disinterested movement now, where even if the money was available, you wouldn't get people stepping up to do stuff. And this is the problem with the movement, right?
What you could do, you see, if say I was in control of that amount of money, what I would do is I would employ people in different regions, and their job would be to stimulate vegan outreach. And to get outreach going in.
Yeah, but Ronnie, they tried that even in 1982 with BUAV. You know, John Page and Paddy Broughton. They actually was going to put together a fully equipped bus, right, which was like an office on wheels, and they would send it around, and they'd say to the local group, right, what do you want to do? And this was the time when there was local groups. Like, what do you want to do? We'll print your leaflets and all that. We'll facilitate what you want to do. Now, there isn't even that local group structure to do that with.
No, but I think what you'd have to do is kind of what you got to do is create that. In other words, and it's all down to instigators. You see, like if you look at any local group, whether it's
don't you think that's a key part of what we don't have anymore? Because all the big groups don't encourage autonomy; they encourage you to support them, and even the kind of big name activists now, again, don't encourage autonomy. They don't encourage people to go and start their own groups or to go and encourage others to do the same. They encourage you to donate or to support their content.
Andy, what I'd like to believe to be the case is that people like Ed and people like Joey are actually giving loads of their income away to people.
I'd like to think so too, but there's nothing at all stopping them saying, hey, by the way, obviously I only make like one video a week. In that gap, what's stopping you setting up a group in your...
Yeah.
Because the problem with that is, though, as much as people don't like it when I say these, a lot of the time these people are not supporters, they're customers. And encouraging them to go and do their own thing means you lose their custom. And they don't want to do that.
And I think a lot of people substitute, that they're watching of these videos by, the YouTube superstar people, so to speak.
Yeah, that's activism, isn't it? Yeah.
That they sort of kind of, in a sense, regard that as activism rather than, and they're looking to this superhero to usher in
course,
peace,
yeah.
rather than kind of, going out and doing it themselves, or being encouraged to go out and do it themselves. So it's kind of this kind of celebrity culture sort of acts in a sense as a disincentive to people to do their own thing.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And obviously, just on the note as well, I appreciate there are people for various reasons, whether we're talking about age, disability, childcare, that can't get out and do activism in the street or those kind of things, or maybe they've not got the confidence to do something like this, right? And so they feel that their financial contributions are activism. Absolutely fine. You still don't need to donate to the huge organisations and rich influencers.
But it's kind of really difficult because you think that it would be better if those people were to finance local activism.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, and these people that are unable to sort of get out and do certain things, who are limited so much to their donations or sharing a post, they're much more valuable assets to the grassroots than someone. I mean, some of these big name influencers, you're just $5 or $10 that comes through on their bank statement at the end of the month. They don't know who you are. Whereas this grassroots group are going to really appreciate you. And as Roger mentioned earlier, you're going to get like daily updates. You're going to see what they're doing all the time.
And also, it's the difference between getting their, rickety old van through an MOT and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yes. It's the difference between whether they still go out or not. Whether it's the difference between some of these people, and again, I don't give a shit whether you like it or not. It's the difference between an extra drink and
or even a computer update and this kind of stuff. So
absolutely, yes, yeah. This stuff for the grassroots is enormous. It's the ability or the difference between them going out and not being able to go out. For the vast majority of these big organisations and influencers, it makes no difference whatsoever. You are just a digit on the bank statement.
That's right. But I think the key to get an activism going in a really localized area is to kind of find the people who will be instigators, because like if you look at any local group,
are there many of those left, Ronnie?
Well,
not as many as we'd like, but more than none.
I think there are people that potentially could do that with someone else giving them the encouragement to do it, which is why I said that if I had millions of pounds, I would employ.
Yeah, but Ronnie, truthfully, is there any evidence to support what you're saying here?
Well, I think I think there kind of is, but you see, obviously there are people that have gone and there are activist groups still operating, not like they used to be, but there are some, and those have been set up by people who've been instigators, so there are people around that do that, and I think there's a potential of others, but I think you've kind of got to have someone to instigate the instigators.
Yeah. Well, the other issue we've got, like we saw with, for example, with Kevin, local to us, is even the best organisers and instigators, they don't have anyone that kind of like supports them and takes over from them. And so it gets to a point after however many years where they're completely burnt out and done and they can't do this anymore and no one takes over from them. And so the whole thing just dies.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm quite sure there's a number of active groups that if just one person was no longer able to do it, that would kind of be the end of it.
Well, yeah, certainly the case in Dublin. Declan has stopped for various reasons. I've stopped for various reasons. Nobody has come knocking on our door going, right, give us your banners, give us your leaflets.
Exactly. I mean, this falls back into the category of, a lot of the times when you have these conversations, people are like, well, we don't have a starting budget. Well, I guarantee somewhere not too far away from you, there's probably someone that's already got all of this stuff.
Well, we didn't have a starting budget. You just do it week on week.
Yeah, absolutely. But you'd be surprised how many people, just like you say, have already got all these banners or all these placards or all this stuff sat in a garage somewhere because they're no longer organised themselves.
Oh yes, I think that's really often.
The way that everything is corporatized now is that people just literally wait around for AV to tell them when it's 2 months' time. Let's have another cube, kind of thing. And
I've heard that from people, in the past where they've kind of said, "Well, the problem is I live in a town where there's no AV," and it's like, well, you could do something else, That's not the only kind of like.
Yeah, you see, I think if you had someone, if you had someone employed at a regional level to kind of find instigators and encourage instigators down at a more localized level, because that person's employed, that
Yeah, okay,
that
Ronnie. So
permanent
say
position.
you're the
Yeah.
instigator or the person who kind of facilitates the. How do you find them? Where do you go first?
Well, I think one thing you do is maybe, I mean, first of all, a lot of these groups have, a lot of the local vegan groups have Facebook groups, and so you could put something on there, who's interested in doing a bit of activism, locally in this area, and and start there. Maybe go there
the biggest
and help them
Facebook
out.
group in Dublin, Ronnie, actually argues against even doing things like street stalls, saying it's too militant.
Well, then maybe the answer to that is to set up another Facebook group that kind of is into activism. I mean that's true of there are local I would say a number of local vegan Facebook groups here in England that are opposed to any kind of activism and just want to talk about food basically.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, products. I suppose, as much as obviously we've talked about in the past some of their claims making and stuff, I suppose to use some evidence that supports what Ronnie's saying, you could look at both Animal Rising and We the Free, who have kind of started organising things, and people have shown up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference. Yeah, I mean, I much prefer We the Free to Animal Rising.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously they're both. So, but what I'm saying is, We the Free, they've only existed for about 2 years tops.
Yeah, I mean, we the
and
Free.
Now they've got like organised events in quite a few different places. So yes, it does show that, as Ronnie says, if someone does say, right, we're going to do this at this time at this place, be there if you want. People will come.
We the Free set up. I mean, we've got a We the Free coordinator locally, and it's taken ages to get it, because you've got to go through a certain, you've got to do certain things before We the Free will actually say, right, okay.
Yeah, it's a load of bollocks, Ronnie. This, isn't it?
It's like like they have to have so many. But anyway, he's done.
Come on, I mean, all this corporate structure with all the fucking rules and all that.
Wait.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, that you've had to
they can just fuck off. Whereas they kind of like just get out of there and do it.
Yes, no. I mean,
you don't do that. You've got.
Is that genuine? Have you just had to like jump through their hoops? Have you just had to prove yourself to them?
Well, I think what it is because they're giving the people money, they kind of want.
Yeah, but fucking hell can they not Google your name? Come on.
Well,
come on. I think you've given 50 years of your life to this shit. If you've got to, put forward a case for yourself, then they can get fucked. Like they should be proving themselves to you.
But you see,
this really is a complete load of bollocks. It's about the corporatization of the movement, and we've got loads of corporate people, we've got loads of entrepreneurs, and we've got no kind of grassroots.
Yeah. I mean, look at the things we've touched on tonight, right? So you guys have been doing this like pretty much huge portions of your life. You've never taken anything from it. You've gone without plenty of fucking times. You are the kind of, I don't know, the inspiration or the role models for us to look up to. If you guys have to prove yourself to a group that set up 2 years ago, then what fucking hope have we got? Genuinely.
Well, absolutely. Although that isn't, things like We the Free aren't my, on what I do. I mean, I prefer.
I know that, but what I'm saying is your name should command enough respect that they like. Hang on, that's Ronnie Lee. No, skip that. Yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know what would happen if I did apply to be one of their organisers, but that isn't something I'd be interested in doing. But nevertheless, what I'm saying is they've now started. They did their first. Whatever they call the shape of their thing, like everyone's got their own shape, haven't they?
I can't remember what theirs is called. Yeah.
Is it a diamond? Or
I think theirs is a diamond. Yeah.
Theirs is a diamond. Yeah, I think they did one. They've done one. They did one in our.
Knowing Paul Bashir, a cube is probably like patented or something or copyright now.
It's surprising that the AV don't organise themselves in the shape of a dollar.
But you see, the thing is, I think now that kind of because of how difficult it is now to sort of like operate, like we did, I think, I'm not opposed to, to certain people being paid to do things. But like I've said, if you had these kind of paid instigators, that was their job, like a full-time
Yeah,
instigator.
but why do they have to be so anal about it with all these frigging rules, Ronnie?
I honestly don't know. I mean, they've all got the rules, haven't they? AV's got the rules as well, and I don't really know what the reason is for all that. I kind of don't. I mean, to
Well, the other
me,
thing about these groups is they don't like you to be part of other groups, right? So, like, if you go and do this cube, they wouldn't like it if they knew you were doing the diamond as well. Like, it's almost like these groups compete against one another, which is really silly as well. And I didn't realise just how bad that actually was until I started organising NARM last year. And you find out that all the like in-house politics of like, well, this group don't want to stand anywhere near to this group, and this group don't speak to this one, and this person's falling out with this person. You're like, for goodness sake.
I know, but I think we've got this horrendous complication going on in terms of.
Yeah, it's called humanity.
Well, it's yes. I mean, obviously, humanity is complicated, but in terms of what we need to be doing to achieve animal liberation, and it's really simple that we've got. The only way we're going to do it is educating a hell of a lot more people to become vegan, and that should be our main focus. And that's really simple. It's a really simple concept. And yet you have these huge conferences discussing all sorts of different things, and a hell of a lot of it is welfareism.
Yeah.
And I think, what is this? You're massively overcomplicating. What we need to do is this is really simple. All right, it can be done in various ways. Vegan education can take various forms, but ultimately it's a simple concept that we need to focus on.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, and yet that isn't what's happening. This is huge. Is it being deliberately overcomplicated? Are there sinister forces at work?
Well, the thing is, though, Ronnie, I think we used to think as organisers, as kind of facilitators or something, that there seems to be this kind of managerial kind of psychology that's entered the movement somehow.
Oh yes, I mean it's. I mean, it was much. Back in the day, it was a lot simpler. You had the national organisations, and they'd been around for decades. So single issue kind of welfarist national organisations, very conventional. Prior to the 1970s, the only kind of breakaway from that prior to the 1970s was the Hunt Sabs, which.
Obviously, in terms of general campaigning, surely it was the radicalisation of the BWV was the key.
Well, I think in terms of national organisations, it kind of was. But I mean, prior to that, you had you had sort of local animal rights groups emerging. You had the emergence of direct action and stuff like that. You had kind of that kind of came a bit before the BWV was kind of so-called radicalised, that most of the people that kind of were involved in sort of taking over the BYB were vegans, people that kind of believed in animal rights. And then the same thing happened with other I mean, like most of the people that ended up working at the League Against Cruel Sports were vegan, weren't they? Although that was never perhaps as radical as the BYB. You kind of had, you sort of had that, but you see, you didn't have. You had your national organisations, and you had your sort of grassroots, local animal rights groups, didn't you? That was that. It was just those two things. But now you've got like a third thing that's come into this, like these. You've got these kind of globalised organisations that operate a franchise system. There's this third aspect to everything now, isn't there? That didn't exist.
But why doesn't that mean that there's a lot more going on rather than less?
Because I think people wait around to be told what to do by these groups rather than instigating their own activities. I mean, the reason why like the Animal Liberation Front spread everywhere, and the reason why there was so much ALF action at one time was because people did it themselves, because people carried out saw what others were doing and thought, right, I can do that in my own area, and they went ahead and did it. You had autonomy. You had people being prepared to to act autonomously back in the day. And all right, the ALF is very much diminished for various reasons, but I think that maybe the most important thing that the ALF can hand down to posterity is this idea of autonomy, this idea of kind of do it yourself activism, and because that leads to a lot more actions taking place, because no one's waiting to be told what to do by someone else, having to wait a month for something to be organised by somebody else. No, and that's kind of what we're lacking. We're lacking, this idea of people just going and doing it themselves, and really that's not encouraged. If anything, it's probably discouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. It is discouraged. You don't hear any autonomy anywhere anymore, and that's because obviously the ALF were just an anonymous group that just had a name, essentially, no real hierarchy or anything. There's no idols to look up to. Whereas now,
no, there wasn't.
That's exactly what they compete against each other because they want to be idolised. Basically, they want your money. They want to be at the top of the tree.
Yeah, you see, the ALF had no
to go and do your own group because you're a direct threat to them by doing that.
Yes, I mean, there are a couple of positive things from the sort of national organisations here, like both Viva and the Vegan Society have set up this kind of local groups network thing. I mean, they very much want people to for it to be branded in their own name when people do it. But at least they've done that. At least they've encouraged people in local areas to do outreach, and I think that's a positive step.
Yeah, but even on that one now, Ronnie, what would have happened before would be they go, okay, well, give us your gazebos, and then people would just cover their names up with something else, and they would just go, we're not going to go for this branding shite. We're going to think for ourselves. We're going to be autonomous, and we're just going to get the work done, right?
Yeah. People aren't like that now. No, they're not like that.
No, people are waiting around to be told what to do. Now, we're not going to get animal liberation by people waiting around for Paul Bashir to tell them what to fucking do.
Oh no, you're never going to get sufficient action. You're never going to get sufficient activity.
I mean, why? We the free AV why don't people go? Okay, well, let's just get 4 or 5 people together and we'll do a cube. It doesn't have to be an AV.
It's because for some reason people tend not to be like that anymore.
It's like they've got a copyright. They haven't got a copyright. Just do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, locally, I just, our local vegan group is totally independent. We've got our own logo, your own name. We don't kind of, use,
I would have thought, right, if you put a crowdfunder out and said, look, we're trying to organise, some very regular once a week demos, none of this every 2 weeks, 2 months malarkey. We want 2 or 3 laptops. Here's a crowdfunder. You're going to get funding for that, and then you just kind of like turn up with the laptops, give them out, and then bingo, you've got an event.
Well, you kind of, yeah. I mean, you'd hope that would.
It used to happen in Dublin. We used to do 5 hours on a Sunday with Vigo and VIP, and then we'd go up and do 2 hours for Earthling Experience, and that was just people turning up with their own laptops and a few laminated things. Go Vegan World leaflets. You've got an event. You don't have to go through training and all this kind of shit.
No. I completely agree. But it
doesn't make sense that people feel as though they've got to look for leaders or something.
But you see, are today's vegans, because of course the activists back in the day. I use the word vegan because like back in the day, when we had the animal rights groups and all the autonomous stuff going back, in the 70s, 80s, so on, we were all mostly vegan, weren't we? So is there something fundamentally different about today's vegans in that people seem unable to?
Or today's people, which some people would claim, but I mean, I don't like
today's
to go
people.
down.
Yeah.
I don't like to go down that road, but I mean, people say people are not as political as they used to be, and of course, the movement has moved towards the right in the way that society has moved towards the right. I mean, these people who are on, Instagram, and they've got Patreon accounts, you won't find them in squats. You'll find them in 5-star hotels.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but then of course it's very the whole. I think it's now unlawful to set up a squat, isn't it? I mean that's all, all that's changed as well. Being able to kind of live very very cheaply and do your own thing is so much more difficult these days. In several ways than it was back then.
We need to go back to the communes and start shagging again.
Yes, I think I'll probably kill me at my
But do you
age
think,
now.
obviously, I mean, I would agree to some degree that obviously I think there's a difference in people. But would you also think there's a difference how a lot of people enter the movement now in terms of they don't really appreciate the urgency of the situation and they don't really understand kind of like that they can do these things. The vast majority, I mean, because like when you've talked about some of the stuff in the past, a lot of outreach and a lot of kind of like how people would go vegan would come from either a leaflet or a conversation. Whereas now lots and lots of people will go vegan because they watch a film. And so there's no after information there. They don't see you in the street already doing this thinking, hey, I could do that. I could hand some leaflet.
Yes.
There's none of that.
Yeah, there is that. And the other big thing, there's a big difference between then and now is that we were really all very young people, when you go back, the activists, back in the day were overwhelmingly in their kind of late teens.
Well, I'd say that the demographic of the vegan movement is still young, Ronnie.
Yeah, I was going to say
the demographic of the vegan movement is still young, but the demographic of activists isn't. Of out on the street activists kind of isn't. It's not the same as it was back then, and for some reason, younger people aren't getting out there. Whereas it was overwhelmingly young people back in the day. Now it isn't.
Okay, so why is that then?
Is it to do with social media? Does social media got a part to play in this?
What would social media do? I mean, that surely would make it easier.
No, in other words, that people remain on. Well, where Andy said, people find out about it through, say, YouTube.
Well, what's wrong with that? So long as they get out there, then.
As long as they get out there afterwards. But you see, because they haven't found out about it out on the street, then that.
Yeah, I do think there's something to it in that instance because, for example, the people that I know now that have gone vegan from listening to or participating in these TikTok lives, most of them either come on as guests or host their own TikTok lives. It's almost like, hey, I saw you doing this. This is easy enough for me to do. I'll replicate it. But if you just watch a film on YouTube and that finishes, then what? What are you going to do? Go and film the animals in the farm like Dominion did? Because that's the only thing you've learned, right? So you haven't watched people already performing activism that you can easily replicate. You've just watched
but Andy, that doesn't work too. I mean, like for 10 years, we were like role models on the street of Dublin. We were doing it at least once a week and mostly 3 times a week, right? We were doing 11 hours a week. And like nobody has stepped up and said, okay, we'll take it on now.
Yeah. Which is obviously very disappointing. But obviously there can't be.
Isn't it?
What are those people doing instead? Is the question.
Well, obviously.
Is there like other groups, or are they doing online activism, or what?
Yeah, but the point is, you're then talking about if they're involved with AV in the Irish situation, you swap something that was 3 times a week for something like once every 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, quite often if they've now moved over to something like AV, I don't know if it's one of the rules or what, but they're kind of like you keep within this group.
Yeah, I know. We used to. It was very frustrating when AV started in Dublin. We were down there and we'd have all our volunteers and everything, and they would go there, and then you see on Facebook they had 50, 60, 70 people, and none of them walked down the half a mile to our place.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
No, that it's kind of like an unwritten rule or whatever.
You see, I think that the other thing is that we were kind of very much separate from ordinary society.
Jennifer's saying we're missing questions.
Yeah, they haven't asked any questions. They've just requested the box. But if you've got a question, type it in the thing. Normally, it's children that just say, "I've got a question," over and over again without actually asking the question. Just ask it.
You see, I was saying that, you know, back in the day, we were very much outside of society, you know, in the way we lived, the way we operated. You know, the fact that we were vegan, you know, it was so much more difficult to operate socially as a vegan. Then, you know, there were very few places that had vegan options, for instance. So we were kind of separate. We were kind of separate from society, and I think that kind of made it a sort of more natural for us to do activism, because, you know, we were quite prepared to, you know, to kind of, you know, do things that other people weren't prepared to do.
How does that work though, Ronnie? I mean, like,
okay.
I mean, like, you could say that about the pioneers of the vegan movement. I mean, they were real revolutionaries.
Oh, absolutely. But you see now, because, you know, in a sense, because it's become so much easier to operate socially as a vegan, that basically, I think what happens is people become vegan and then they just carry on with their lives the same as before. When we became vegan,
they become plant-based, is what you mean, isn't it?
Well, they may become vegan in that they might genuinely, you know, be opposed to the exploitation of other animals by humans. Say they might, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, they may genuinely become vegan in that sense. It's just they don't become activists,
and then they can't go on the internet and go, look, I want to do stuff. Who's with me?
Well, no, because you see, I don't think. Because what they do is like what I call tick box veganism. In other words, they find out about, you know, what happens to the animals. They decide that's wrong. They think, well, I don't want to be part of that, so I'm going to become vegan. So I don't contribute that to anymore.
It's almost unbelievable to me, Ronnie, though, because I mean, like, now being an activist and being an organizer and being a producer of stuff like leaflets and all that is easier now than it's ever been. We've got a global, instant, worldwide communication system, which we never did. We're not talking about letraset anymore. We're talking about we can put a leaflet together within an hour, right?
But you see, we were kind of separate from ordinary society. You know the way.
What does that mean, though?
Well, it means that we were kind of like dedicated to activism. You know, it was a bit like.
Well, and all the new vegans aren't.
Well, no, because I don't.
Why?
Well, because I think what happens is that, you see, back in the day, if you became vegan, you weren't really able to operate within ordinary society because it was so difficult. So therefore, you kind of separated yourself out from ordinary society and got into activism and stuff like that. Whereas now,
that doesn't. I mean, like, that makes you kind of an outsider. So how does it help rather than hinder?
Well, because you're an outsider in the way you live, but that doesn't mean you can't still give information to other people, you know, within society, which is
So can the modern day vegans easier than we could?
Yes, it's easier in terms of, like, you know, the practicality of it, but I'm thinking more about, like, the psychology of it.
Okay.
You know, that we, you know, to become we had to become
Melanie Joy's fault, you're saying?
Well, back in the day, to live as a vegan and everything, it was like a real effort. You kind of had to, you know, be separate from
but Ronnie,
society.
Why isn't it the fact that it's not a real effort now make it easier to them to do it?
Because they can continue to live an ordinary life and still be vegan, whereas we couldn't. We couldn't do that. As soon as you become vegan, then you're separate from society, so you might as well be even more separate.
Yeah, Andy, does that make sense to you, that one?
Yeah, sort of. I think the huge difference now is that nobody, for the most part, is encouraging anyone to do anything after they go vegan. That's the real problem. You've got the go-tos with your groups and your organisers and that sort of stuff. And most of them, once you've taken that step, they're kind of like, well, see ya. And so there is nobody encouraging what Ronnie's talking about, that kind of like, this is who we are. Well, it's not who these people are. These people are still office workers and pub workers and all those things that are just basically adopting a plant-based diet and going out of their way to avoid other animal products. They're not vegan activists. They're not animal rights activists, because they've never had any of that kind of like taught to them, and they've never really seen it in action.
No, I mean, I agree with that. And, the only way of getting those people active is to have a lot more encouragement and I suppose help, in a sense, to get them active. And that is what really doesn't exist, which is why I'd like to see a whole network of instigators, even if those people had to be employed.
So, okay. If you want to do that, Ronnie, what is the first step that needs to be done now, do you think? The very first thing to bring in, to operationalize what you want.
Well, it's difficult because, obviously, if you were going to set up something, and, you wanted to employ people in different regions to be instigators, then you'd have to have that funding to be able to do that, wouldn't you? And it's where is that gonna come from? You've like I've said, you've got Animal Aid and Viva are doing that to some extent, but it's only but really with both of them, it's only a really small part of kind of what they do, and then there's also kind of strings attached to it as well. So it's not isn't exactly how I would envisage it, but it's like where first of all you need the funding, and secondly you'd have to have some good people to actually run it, and that's what you'd need for it to come into existence. And it's how's that going to happen?
Well, it's funny though, isn't it? Because we've been talking about how we operate without money, and now you're saying that the first thing we need is money. Steve is saying, why would anyone need to be an activist?
Well, the only way we're going to, if you want to educate a lot more people to go vegan, who's going to do it? It's only people getting out there and doing the education, isn't it? And so that's why we need as many activists as possible in terms of vegan outreach.
Yeah, I mean, a far quicker way than employing someone and going through all that rigmarole would be some of these big groups to say, hey, for the next 6 months, don't donate to us. Save that money. Get yourself a table, get yourself a banner, get yourself in your local area and start spreading this message. That would be more effective than anything that we could do. One video from Earth and Ed saying, stop watching my stuff, go and do your own thing. Would make
donate to me
difference in employing 1,000 people.
I think that would help.
It would, absolutely would. If all these big groups and all these big names for a little while just said, hey, we've had loads of your support, we've had loads of your money, but this isn't growing fast enough and the emergency is fucking huge, right? So we need you to go and do something. We need you to go and spread this message, and we need you to go and activate as many others to do exactly the same thing.
Absolutely.
That would make a huge change, yeah. But the problem is they don't want to do that, and that's our issue.
I think yes, I think that is a big problem. But I think secondly, I think maybe that kind of just saying to people, this is what you need to do. For a lot of people, that isn't enough, and I think
true. Okay, yeah, there could be some instructions that come along with that, but all of these people and all these groups have got the infrastructure in place, the leaflets printing ability, all this stuff to educate people enough to go and set it up, and to actually fundraise them for once. Spend some money on grassroots rather than welfare campaigns or touring the world.
The thing that confuses me, lads, is the fact that I don't buy into the idea that we were special people or anything like that. We were just ordinary people. And now what we did then is easy to do now, and yet there's less of it. It doesn't make sense.
But it's obviously a reason for it, though, isn't there? It's not just happens by chance. And I think maybe there's a number of factors. It's not just one thing. There's a number of factors of kind of caused this situation to arise. I mean, what the thing about the younger people, where are they? And they were kind of more, when we were younger, we were more in a position to do that because we weren't encumbered by all these responsibilities.
There's loads of young people in the vegan movement, Ronnie.
Yes, yeah. There's loads of young people in the vegan movement, but why aren't those young people out there doing the activism? That's the big question, isn't it?
What's the big answer?
Yeah, there's if you look at the demographic of people that are vegans, they're mostly younger people who are vegan, but they're not. But if you look at the demographic of vegan activists, that's mostly older people. So why is it that younger people aren't activists like they used to be?
Well, surely most people who do the cubes and all that are younger people, but why don't they then start to think for themselves and say, right, I'm not going to wait around for another 2 months. I'll go and do this next week.
Mm. I'm not sure. I'm not sure to what extent, a lot of them are young. I mean, some of them are younger people, but like you do get quite a lot of older people involved as well in these things. I don't think they're as young as like we were in general back in the day. But yeah, younger people do get attracted to those things. But you're right, they're not.
But okay, so you say you've got cubes or diamonds or whatever all over the place every now and again, and also in the big cities. Why doesn't anybody? How come anybody hasn't come up with the idea of, well, in between doing the big ones in the city?
Do you not think though, Roger, that the ease that we're talking about, i.e., obviously it was much more difficult for you guys, is also part of the problem? Yeah, it is much easier for people to do all of these things, but because it's much easier for them to avoid animal death.
How can being easier be a problem?
Well, in the sense that think about it like how Ronnie was explaining it earlier, or maybe it was yourself, can't remember now, where you just wake up and you just do animal rights from the start. Nobody thinks like that anymore because they wake up. They've got all their stuff in the cupboards. They don't have to think about anything. They don't have to sacrifice anything. They don't have to give up anything. They don't have to think and make do and frugally live. They just carry on as normal, and that's enough for them. So whereas you guys were living and breathing this stuff every single day, and it was who you were, that's not the case anymore. Like I said, these people are who they are in social life. They're their jobs, they're their titles, and they're just vegans too. Whereas you were vegans first. You were vegans that did X. Well, these are X that are vegan. That's the problem. Those roles have completely switched. Most people don't wake up and the first thing they think about is this subject anymore. That's the problem, yeah.
If even if we kind of set aside the divide between veganism and plant-based, there's more people now involved than there was back in the day. There must be some of those people who've got the kind of nous to take the initiative, surely.
I think there's loads of people out there. You'd be surprised if you kind of went around and had someone, like Ronnie suggested, someone in each town or someone in each county, say, that was willing to say, right, we're going to do this every Wednesday. You'd get people that definitely turn up. There are people out there that want to get involved, but they're just not organisers. They need an organiser. They need someone who's going to set a day or a time or a place, and they'll turn up to it. There's loads of people that you could put in the they'll turn up if it's organised category, but there's just very, very few people that you can put in that organiser category. That's the problem.
Yes, but I think people can be encouraged and helped to become organisers and instigators, though.
Because we can look at something like Camp Out, right? And say, well, it's organised, it's put on, everything's there, and so people attend it. So the numbers can turn up, they can do these things, but someone's got to organise it, and that's what we've got a severe lack of.
Yeah, but the things that
do organise for the most part don't often help our cause, do they? That's the problem too.
Conundrum or what?
It is, but we've run well over our time.
Yeah, just a bit, Ronnie, just a bit.
But it's been interesting, and
But no, fantastic. Thank you, guys. But before we go, just a huge thank you to the pair of you again. I think this live again has really sort of encapsulated just how much dedication the pair of you have given to this movement, and I don't think that that's anywhere near sort of credited enough. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. But what else would we do?
Well, that's very true.
Yes. Anyway, so same time.
Yeah, same time next week. Are we finally onto the band of beep?
Yes.
Ooh.
I think probably we will be next time. Yeah. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, the band of muscle. What was it called? Band of
Murky.
Murky, yeah, the band of Murky.
the band of militants. It was called.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that chirpy note, we'll be back same time, 9 o'clock. And thank you so much, everyone. Good night.